Thank you, guys. It's an honor being back. It's true I played golf, but that was not supposed to be part of today's symposium. Really glad to be back. Talking about MSG and umami. The slide behind me says delicious or evil. And I can think of no other food ingredient or additive, at least in the Western culture, that is as vilified and as basically a pariah as much as monosodium glutamate. Is anyone in here allergic to MSG? Anybody? Raise your hand. Sir, do you mind, do you want to taste something for me? Please? Can I put you on the spot? The reality is, there are a lot of people that hate Asian food. There are a lot of people that hate our food at Momofuku. Recently was a guest that came in about a couple months ago and was complaining to the staff that we were adding MSG to our food at Noodle Bar. She was angry. She was so angry. She was saying she had headaches, she was sweating, heart palpitations, basically Chinese restaurant syndrome. She was allergic to MSG. I wanted to, the next day, say on the menu, if you think you're allergic to MSG, please assume that we do put MSG in our food, because all evidence suggests that MSG is not harmful to you. You would think otherwise, because everywhere you go, it says we don't add MSG. But no one asked the question, is MSG actually bad for you? In fact, this whole symposium is about appetite. MSG is something that helps you think something is more delicious. It is in so many fast food items. It's in Doritos. In actuality, I'll get into the structure of it a little bit later. Glutamic acid is in everything. It's in your brain. We have a glutamic receptor in our stomach. It's one of the few things that when we eat food, our stomach can detect glutamic acid. Obviously, our brain, it's in our brain. Without glutamic acid, we cannot function as humans. And of course, recently, it's been more well known as and documented as umami, the fifth taste on our taste buds: salt, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami. That savoriness, that meatiness that we all look after, we all are trying to create in our own kitchens at home, trying to make something delicious and reverse engineer it from there. And this molecule, the strand of amino acid, glutamic acid, what we know is right here, it's just a salt. It's a salt, one sodium molecule attached to a glutamic acid. And that's what we get. That's why people assume that MSG is salty. Well, it is. It's a salt. And more importantly, it's a delicious salt. And if I was demoing, I was going to make you a dashi, and we reduced it down to a crystallized form, you know what we'd have? We'd have this. It'd be the same thing. Our bodies, if I had you guys eat this, and I thought about doing this, which is basically just pure MSG, or some of these fermented products that the kitchen, the Nordic Food Lab, created by Lars here, fermented foods is one of the food groups very high in glutamic acid, and if high in umami, our bodies would process it the same. So if I gave you a teaspoon of MSG and I gave you the same amount of glutamic acid equivalent of in miso, your body would process it the same way. Yet, everyone in here probably wouldn't have a problem eating miso, or they wouldn't have no problem with soy sauce. But there is a group of diners that tend to not eat Asian food. So I'm not saying anyone's wrong here. I'm just saying I'm attaching this to culture, American culture, and there seems to be this urban myth, this idea that I can't eat Asian food because I'm going to get a headache. It's just going to make me feel bad. It's going to, Chinese restaurant syndrome. And the funny thing is in the late 60s, an Asian man wrote to the New England Journal of Medicine saying that he found a pattern every time he eats Chinese food with his friends, he got these terrible sort of conditions. And it was in an editorial letter, and nobody questioned it. It just became part of American food culture that MSG is bad for you. And we're now 50 years later, going back to this lady at Momofuku, and the reason why I'm talking about Msg and Umami so much is my own staff was hesitant and reluctant to say that, confidently we're not adding MSG, but it was such a taboo topic, nobody really wanted to discuss it or educate the customer or even educate themselves about it because it was just assumed that it's a terrible thing. Can you think of any other ingredient that is assumed to be bad? You wouldn't add it to your food, I can't think of any other food ingredient. Everyone assumes it's bad. Let's assume that it's bad. Why? Ask the question, why is it bad for you? Find me some evidence that proves that it's bad for you. The evidence is overwhelmingly against you, that all data suggests that MSG is not harmful to you. In fact, people consume it in large amounts. So the same people, and I'm talking about friends, some friends that are here, some friends that are not chefs, people that say they are allergic to MSG will happily dip their sushi in soy sauce and eat a miso soup. And you know what? Like two of the highest things that have, two food ingredients that are extraordinarily high in MSG are Marmite and Vegemite. People are slathering their toast with Marmite in the mornings. That's just a healthy dose of umami. So for me, the way I'm looking at umami, it's the same way as I look at MSG. And it's one and the same. And, at the restaurant, obviously we don't add MSG. We naturally harness it. And I think everyone here is familiar with ways you can harness it. Parmesan is high in MSG. Tomatoes. Foods that are naturally high in amino acids. MSG is a non-essential amino acid, but I think it is an essential amino acid for cooks and chefs. We make stocks. We added, kombu, seaweed is actually, you cannot find a food group that is higher with natural glutamic acid, which is why you see it in dashi, which is why we build most of our stocks with kombu. Almost all of our foods, we're actually trying to find that appetizing, delicious factor that is umami. But we still don't add MSG to our food. And I'm not saying I'm an expert on MSG. I'm not, just like most of you, I did poorly in school. I slept through chemistry. I have no idea really what I'm talking about. But, I'm lucky enough to have a lot of friends that are smarter, that are doctorates in chemistry, in microbiology. And I ask, and there's only one person that says that, there is potentially a way that people are not allergic to MSG, but they have a tolerance issue to it. All of our bodies have, not MSG in it, but glutamic acid, a level of glutamate. And it's possible that eating umami-heavy foods may throw that out of balance. But again, that is, until I have some data out there, until I can see it on paper and it's fact, or that it's overwhelming evidence, I'm not going to change my opinion. I'm not going to base it on some cultural myth. I'm not going to serve food to my customers without it being properly researched and at least having an understanding of food. And a simple drawing, but our bodies consume MSG and umami in the same way. again, some people don't like vitamins all that much, but when you consume a vitamin C tablet, your body processes it in the same way that when you drink orange juice. Yes, there are a small group of people that are against supplements and stuff like that, but I'm sure I could come up with a better analogy. But it's something, Lars even said that, I don't know if it's, I couldn't find the study, but I think this one was actually most significant, was human breast milk was
I think it's 10 times
10
more.
times as
Dave
high.
and I actually had when we were talking about this yesterday, we had sort of this umami trivia cue off. And one of the things we're talking about is that human breast milk has 10 times more umami or glutamic acids than cow's milk. And I think that's a really great indicator of why we sort of seek these flavors out in our food. I mean, we are actually metabolized to process these in a really fundamental way, and we seek them out. It's part of why we cook, why we became smarter as humans, because we were able to cook. And it's why this is one of the major things that we seek for.
Right, and so from an early age, literally, we're nurtured on glutamic acid. That's what we find is delicious. You eat a bag of Doritos, you know why it's delicious? Not the cheesy flavor, it's because it's coated in MSG. And that's why we're trying to make dashi. That's why everyone's so enamored with sort of Asian products, because it has that sort of punch that we just don't find in other food groups. And it's what literally is appetizing. It is something that is mind-boggling to me, that is still, there's so much literally pushback from Western culture. Especially since it seems that we're nurtured on it. We have evolved to have a receptor for it in our stomach, and our brains can't function without it. And it is one of the 5th taste buds. So you have to ask yourself these questions, all right? Like, is MSG really bad for you? I always use the dry-aged beef analogy.
Exactly. I mean, if you have a piece of sort of raw ham, and then you compare Iberico or Parma to it, there's such a difference, and that's what we're talking about. And that's this umami flavor, that's MSG basically encapsulated, that you take a very simple but elegant processes in terms of enhancing the MSG and things, and you basically get this beaker of salt.
Right. When we dry age beef, when we eat that beautiful, beautiful Iberico ham, when we eat a wheel of Parmesan, when we eat soy sauce, when we are eating reconstituting dried mushrooms, these are all food groups that are extraordinarily high in natural umami. We're drying that piece of beef not just to make it a little bit more tender, but to have an enzymatic reaction where the proteins are going to turn into an amino acid. That amino acid is glutamate. The reason we find it more delicious is because it is higher in glutamic acid than it was in its previous state. That's why it's so delicious, right? And other reasons, obviously cured meats, which is why you can inoculate it with microbes to create that, to further help that process of microbial enzymatic reaction. Because it's just so hard for me to explain to people, or at least to my own staff, something that's an analogy for them to understand that, okay, wait, I like almost everyone likes dry-aged beef. Why do I like it more? So the question I have is not really that you should go back to your kitchens and dump MSG and everything, but the question really is twofold. One is obviously, we need to know more about it. Two is there's a strange placebo effect with Chinese restaurant syndrome. I mean, people think that they're eating, there's a lot of studies that have been done for this actually, where you think that you're eating MSG, but you're not. And obviously the placebo effect is they think they have the symptoms and they don't. So, yet all of this is still based on cultural beliefs, food myths. And if anything, the past 20 some odd years, since Harold McGee, since Ferran, since Heston, all these great chefs started cooking, almost everything that we've held to be true culturally about food have proven to be wrong, right? we've only done that because we've questioned. We've asked, why is something a certain way? Yet, we've done that with techniques and everything, almost every ingredient, yet we are stopping with probably the biggest outlier of them all, which is Msg and Umami. There's such little understanding of it on a natural level, and it's so vilified on an artificial level that I find that it should be a microcosm of where we need to be, and it's why we're all here today, because we need to continually question and to get better and to further our education. And being more knowledgeable is never a bad thing. That's something that Wiley Dufresne has always taught me, and I've always learned is...
Myself as well.
Right? If we know, I mean, I'll just leave it at this. If MSG is so bad for us, can we explain why is it bad for us? And I don't think anyone in this room can really tell me that. And that's all I want people to do, is to start questioning the things that we take for granted. You know, we've gotten so far in the food world, and food has improved so much, and unless we start questioning and asking why certain things are the way they are, I don't think we're going to match that improvement and continue to improve. So, thank you much, guys.
Okay, we've got some time for questions, so hands in the air over here. We've got some questions.
Hi. I'm wondering, it's a very bold thing that you've come and talked about this morning, and I really applaud that. It's very interesting now how much work in the Nordic Food Lab and in top kitchens all around the world are basically experimenting with different versions of the umami flavor using all sorts of different ingredients. The underlying assumption on the part of all the chefs involved in those experiments is that some naturally synthesized version of umami, something that comes from a clever combination or reduction of ingredients in the kitchen, is ultimately more exciting on the human palate than the bolt-on, reduced form of synthetic MSG. So would you be of the view that even if artificially synthesized MSG is not bad for us, it's still likely to be less interesting gastronomically than the kind of umami that we all strive in our kitchens to create through creativity?
It's a heavy question, and I'm going to give you maybe an indirect response. If that's the case where it's not as delicious per se as using natural MSG, then why would you're presuming that when you make a dish, you're going to use salt, right? Fleur de sel, Malden, a variety, something to season your food. My question to you is, why wouldn't we season that with MSG? It is a salt in itself as well, you're right? Most of the salt you used is not natural. It's denatured in itself. So it's a question. It literally makes food more delicious. Why would I not add it? You know, you use salt so you can actually, flavor it as well. You have two things in one. So that's why I don't have the perfect answer, but certainly in my own kitchens, obviously I'm not going to say, hey, dump this can of MSG into the stock, it's going to make it better. Obviously that's true, but the reason we're here is we want to take the slow approach, we want to make food the right way, but I want to be able to tell my cook, the reason we're not adding MSG to this dish is because of this, this, and this. And I want those answers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of what David's saying is like we don't ever want to use crutches in the kitchen. We're always looking for inventive ways of pursuing flavor and using sort of fermentation techniques to have the primary metabolic pathways, which is this umami flavor, but then the secondary and tertiary flavonoids, which are produced in those metabolic pathways, are what creates a really interesting flavor, and I think what we're always searching for. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but we certainly don't ever pursue crutches.
Okay, we have a question here. Hang on for the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
MSG is a very simple molecule, and it is synthetic MSG is identical chemically to natural MSG, We know, I work on how people react to natural. People think natural things taste better. If they're told it's natural, they'll say it tastes better even if it isn't natural. So there is absolutely no reason to believe that in this particular case that synthetic MSG is any different from natural MSG, but people will respond to it differently if they believe it's natural.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
No. It's funny how things are marketed to you, and it's funny. If you look at, say, like Time Life magazine in the 1930s and 40s, like Wrigley's chewing gum, it's just a regular chewing gum in America. I don't know if it's available outside of America, but they're advertising that it's flavored with artificial flavors. It was the cool new thing in 1930 and 40s, all right? Please eat this gum because it's got fake flavor, all right? Now it's all about, hey, it's natural flavors. It's funny how things work out, but if we continue to not question the status quo, especially the culinary status quo, all of which we're in, we're never going to progress. So it certainly helps when experts can voice it. Because it is such a taboo subject, people don't really want to talk about it.
Okay, it's a guy here who's had his hand up for quite a while. If we can get the microphone there.
Hi, Chef. Sorry for the question, but what do you think about biodynamics?
Biodynamics?
Yeah.
I know nothing about biodynamics.
Okay, that's the shortest answer we're going to get today. Maybe another question from this kind of area here in the front.
David, please, how you describe the feeling, the sensation we feel, tasting foods heavy in umami?
Well, Dimitri asked, what is it about food that makes it taste umami? And I think it's something that you crave. It actually is so fitting for the title for this symposium, appetite. It literally is what the foods that you want to eat. And, Italians eat it all the time when they eat pasta with tomato sauce and Parmesan. That is one of the highest umami bombs you could eat. So people tend to think that it's salty, but that's because usually it's in a dried fermented food product. If you eat anything that's fermented, whether it's fish sauce or a fermented miso from the Nordic Food Lab, that's naturally going to be salty because that's how you create it. So it's sort of one and the same. So there's a salty, meaty flavor. Dashi is another simple thing. How can something so light have as much body as like a veal stock? It's very fascinating to me. Thanks, guys.